It's the afternoon of January 11th, 2007. I'm Michael Aron of NJN News. For the Rutgers Project on the Governor and the Brendan T. Byrne Archive, we're going to talk this afternoon to Ray Bateman. Ray was Republican state senator from Somerset County for many years. He was the Senate president from 1970 to 72, and he ran for governor against Brendan Byrne in 1977, an election still talked about today. Ray, when did you first encounter Brendan Byrne?
First time I met Brendan, I debated him. I guess I was in the Senate, either in the Assembly or the Senate, and he was in the prosecutor's office. And I don't even remember what the issue was. It was a debate in Essex County. That's the first time I'd met him.
How long were you in the legislature?
Just under 20 years, 10 in each house.
From what years till what year?
I went in 1958 in the special election. After Malcolm Forbes resigned from the Senate, Bill Oz had resigned from the Assembly to run for the Senate, and I ran for his Assembly seat in a special election in '58. And I almost didn't win in Somerset County. That's pretty tough for a Republican.
How old were you in 1958?
I was just going to be 30.
And
I was the youngest member of the legislature.
And were you a native of Somerset County?
Oh yeah, born and raised.
Where?
Somerville.
Where'd you go to high school?
Somerville High School.
Where'd you go to college?
Wesleyan, Connecticut.
What did your parents do?
My mother was a French teacher, and my father was the publisher of the local paper, Somerset Messenger Gazette.
Publisher? Did he own it? Did he own the paper?
It was owned by about 15 stockholders. He being the biggest stockholder.
Did you work at the paper?
Yeah, oh yeah.
What'd you do?
Everything. I carried newspapers on Wednesday night from the press to the collators. I sold ads. I wrote editorials for 15 years, I guess. Nobody knew I was writing them. This when I was in the legislature.
You still write the columns that I see. So
I write all the time.
Yeah. What was Somerville like when you were growing up?
It was a great little town. It was Somerville was always an ethnically mixed community, and it was a great high school because of that. And it was back in those days we had 4 high schools in Somerset County. Today we have 17. And Somerville was a sending district for Bridgewater and Hillsborough and Branchburg and Raritan and several other communities.
What drew you into politics?
Well, living around a newspaper is, when I was in there, the politicians always came in to sit and chat with the editor, and I got to know them all, and I was fascinated by them. I mean, these were kind of gregarious old guys that enticed me. And then I was a government major in college and went to the Woodrow Wilson graduate program, which I didn't like at all.
Why not?
In Princeton.
Why not?
This was a relatively new program. I think I was in the 2nd or 3rd year, and it was really aimed at civil service in Washington. State Department, Bureau of the Budget types. I had no interest in that.
Well, you were drawn more toward what area?
I wanted to be a politician. Yeah.
Oh, this was for bureaucrats, and you wanted to be an elected official or
work for elected officials, which is what I did initially.
Well, did you go right to Woodrow Wilson School out of Wesleyan University?
Yeah.
And did you finish at the Woodrow Wilson School?
No, I finished a year and a half. It was a 2-year master's, and in my 2nd year, Malcolm Forbes hired me to work for him when he was running for the first time for the state Senate.
What year would that have been?
51.
Why did Malcolm Forbes hire you? How did he meet you? How did you meet him?
I met him through the newspaper and through some Republican meetings and stuff like that.
Running the second time for state senate, had he been successful the first time?
No, he was running against the organization in the primary. He was running against an incumbent Republican state senator who he beat in a primary, if you can imagine that one.
Who was that?
Freese Hess, my next door neighbor, or down the street neighbor in Somerville. And Freese was a good senator, but Malcolm went door to door in Somerset County in a little old truck, the candidate who came to call, and he beat him in a primary.
And then what happened?
Oh, the general election was a pipe, and he was elected in '51 to the state senate, and the month later he went over to France to get General Eisenhower to run for president, and he started Citizens for Eisenhower. So I ran Citizens for Eisenhower in '52 in my second year.
Wow!
And in 1953 he ran for governor. He was in a hurry.
Forbes ran in '53.
Yeah.
Against Minor?
No, he ran against Paul Trost in the primary, and then against all the organizations in the state. We had the first 24-hour telethon in the history of the world, and almost beat him. I mean, he lost, I think, by about 25 or 30,000 votes in the primary, and then Paul Trost lost in the general to Minor. And shouldn't have, but some of the things we did in the primary hurt Trost, I think.
You ran Citizens for Eisenhower out of Somerville, New Jersey?
Out of Trenton.
Out of Trenton. So you were an aide to a state senator at that time, right? And he didn't give up his Senate seat when he
ran for governor. No. He gave it up after his second run for governor. He ran against Minor twice.
Losing both.
I mean, he didn't run against Minor. He ran against Trost, and then he ran against Minor the next 4 years.
What was he like, Malcolm Forbes?
Oh, he was a great guy, and he was a good legislator, and he was courageous. I mean, he in '55 he was up for re-election, and it was that year that there was a major water supply proposal that would have put half of his biggest township, Bridgewater Township, underwater in a big reservoir, Chimney Rock Reservoir proposal. And he thought it was the right thing to do, and he went for it, and he won
the price.
He won by 100 and some votes.
Oh, he won.
Yeah. Just barely won.
Was he also running Forbes magazine at this time?
No, his father was running it. BC.
PC Forbes?
BC. That's who I worked for. So when I went to work for Malcolm, they made me an associate editor of the magazine, and the old man made me write stories. So I had to write stories during the day and work for Malcolm all night long.
Was Stanley Van Ness from Somerville?
Yeah, oh yeah. Stan and my wife were classmates in high school. Very close friend.
Of yours?
Oh yeah.
In high school? Or later?
Later. He was 6 years behind me in high school.
What distinguished him as a kid? Do you remember?
No, because I really wasn't, I didn't have any truck with the kids that were 6 years younger than I was,
Except you married one.
Oh, that's different.
Why do you think Malcolm Forbes was drawn to politics, given that the family was so important in the business world?
Well, he wanted to be president of the United States. I mean, he had it's kind of funny. His son ran for president and had no reason to run for president. Had Malcolm been elected governor, he would have been a presidential candidate in 1960. When he lost to Bob Minor in '57, he realized that dream was gone. So he quit the Senate and dug into the business. Really, the magazine was good, but it became much stronger when he became the boss. He really built it up.
You told us off camera that you babysat Steve Forbes?
Oh yeah, sure. I used to go everywhere with the Forbes family. I have some great stories. I mean, he almost killed us all.
Who did?
Malcolm in his boat.
How?
He decided that he wanted to go into boating, and so he bought a 33-foot inboard, had it taken up to Lake Champlain, and then in 3 segments took it from Lake Champlain up to the St. Lawrence, out to St. Lawrence, around Halifax, and back in towards Boston. And my not then wife, but my engaged wife, and I, and Steve and Malcolm went on the first leg. He didn't even know how to start that goddamn thing. I mean, you know, it was funny. And ship to shore didn't work. We got into a lock on the we got into the Rimouski River, and he went barreling down the river and overturned about 30 boats that were the rowboats that were on the side, you know. And he got to the first lock, and he didn't know how to handle a boat, and so I'm kind of holding off the boat from this stone lock, and he guns it the wrong way, and I went right down in between the boat, and he almost killed me then. But later on in the trip, which in the third lap, and there are a lot of funny stories in between, but in the third lap, he was going from Halifax, Nova Scotia, to Boston, across the Bay of Fundy, with his managing editor, Bob Hyman, and a friend of mine. I couldn't go on that because I was getting married. And it was Labor Day weekend, 1953. 53, 54. Anyway, it doesn't matter. 53. It was Labor Day weekend, and both his engines crapped out. He's out in the middle of the Bay of Fundy, and the ship to shore hadn't worked the whole time, and they tried it again, and they hooked up with the Coast Guard at Cape Cod, and the Coast Guard said, "There's a hurricane 1 hour away, where are you?" And they took Malcolm and his son and Bob Hyman and another guy off that boat as it sank.
Wow.
It's a great story. And from then on, he bought big boats and cruise.
And would later be photographed on a motorcycle and in balloons. So this...
You would have loved him, Michael. He was exciting. He was interesting. He had political courage. He was the real thing.
I did meet him once in the 80s, and
Yeah.
yes, he was quite colorful.
And you know, his life changed later on, but
How do you mean his life changed later on?
well, after he got divorced, he was riding with the fellas, I think.
Mm-hmm. Oh, okay, that's right. That's right. Yes. And became friends with Elizabeth Taylor as well. Yeah.
I was there when he gave her $1 million.
Really?
Yeah. For what charity? For her, I think she was involved in. It might have been AIDS. It was at the 75th anniversary at his house, to which party there were 40 helicopters flew in. I mean, he did things up round.
Back to the 50s, you say he helped recruit Eisenhower into presidential politics. Did you encounter Eisenhower during those presidential years?
Oh, yeah.
Any memory? Any?
Just nothing significant, really. I mean, I was a kid in the background most of the time.
Okay, so 58, you said, was when you
58,
joined?
I got elected first time.
That's when Malcolm Forbes drops out of politics and goes into business. And Tell me again how you got involved.
So the county committee nominated me, and
Bill Ozard took the Senate seat that Malcolm Forbes vacated, creating a vacancy,
Right.
and the county committee
nominated me. And
Malcolm Forbes' aide for the post, basically. I mean, they knew you as Malcolm Forbes' aide.
well, no, I had been executive director of the Republican State Committee for when I left Forbes. I left Forbes when I got married in '54, and I worked for Sam Badine, who was the state chairman, who had been the former Senate president. Terrific guy, one of my real mentors. And I worked for 4 years in the Republican State Committee office in Trenton, at the Stacy Trent Hotel. That's where we were located, and which no longer exists.
The State Street Trenton Hotel?
It was the Stacy Trent. It's right on the corner.
Oh.
It's right in the next corner from the State House, going east.
Oh. What are your recollections of your early assembly years?
Oh, I was the 16th Republican in a House of 60, so we were really in the minority. And my first speaker was Billy Highland, who ended up as Attorney General, and he
A
kind
House
of
of 60, there were only 60 assembly...
16 Republican, yeah.
There were 16 Republicans,
And 44 Democrats.
so there were only 60 members of the assembly
Yeah.
in those days.
That's
This was
right.
pre-66,
Yeah.
one man, one
There
vote.
was 21 senators and 60 assemblymen.
Okay.
And
Bill Highland was the speaker.
Bill Hyman was the speaker, and I was the kid in the assembly. They all befriended me. I was passing bills. And I became minority leader quite quickly, and then the assembly turned over in 63, and so I became majority leader in 65. And I was about to be president or Speaker of the House in '66, and that was '65 was Dick Hughes' second election, and he wiped out Wayne Dumont and wiped out the Republicans, and he brought in 2-to-1 majorities in both houses. That was the first time. In '66 was the first time when the Democrats had ever controlled both houses of the legislature, and 2 years later, the Republicans won both houses 3-1.
Back in the 50s when you started, and in the 60s when you were cutting your teeth, how was politics different from today?
No, it was exciting. It was fun.
You don't think it's exciting and fun for a young man today?
Not as so. No, it wasn't as partisan. There was a lot. Most of my best friends that are alive that were in the legislature are Democrats today. There were close friendships across the aisle. There were no staff in those days, so legislators tended to do their homework. Legislators generally knew more about the laws they were passing then than they do today with big staffs, because the staffs read everything and they don't. I mean, I had guys that read every word in every bill that was introduced. Al Beetleson, who was the president of the Senate after I was. Al Beetleson read every bill that was introduced.
Who were the dominant political figures of the 50s in New Jersey? Any names come to mind?
Sure. Hap Farley was the most dominant Republican in the Senate. I guess Eddie O'Mara was his counterpart in the Senate.
Farley was from Atlantic County.
O'Mara was from Hudson. And then they had all kinds of guys. You got Bobby Littell's father. Bike Littell was an old-time senator. Johnny Lynch's father, John, was a senator. Wayne Dumont. I mean, the Senate was a very strong. The Senate that I got into was a very strong body. A lot of characters, but a lot of people of character too.
21 instead of 40 up until around 1966 or 7, right?
67, it was 40 senators and I think 80 assemblymen.
When did you join the Senate?
67.
In 67. So you never served as the Somerset County Senator, always as... You weren't in it when it was just one
No,
senator.
I was Somerset County Senator.
Oh, you were?
In 67, yes. Somerset was still a single-member district. Today, of course, it's divided 3 ways.
There are 3 different senators representing parts of Somerset. You say you didn't have any staff in those days? You didn't have an aide?
I'll give you, for instance, when I was president of the Senate, I had an executive director, Lou Thurston, you know Lou Thurston, 2 secretaries, and that was it. The president of the Senate has 100 employees today.
Wow. Lou Thurston would go on to be Governor Tom Kaine's first chief of staff.
Right. And Lou Thurston was, when he was my executive, he also was a prime advisor to Bill Cahill when he was governor. I mean, unpaid, but very much involved in the substance of legislation for the governor.
What were the circumstances of your leaving the Assembly and running for Senate?
Bill Osgood went to the PUC.
Public Utility Commission.
Bill and I were, it was unusual. We were very close, and when we were in the legislature, we got less close later. He and I were both majority leaders of the Senate and the House at the same time, from Little Somerset, in 1965.
So 67, you move over to the Senate.
In the election of 67, and so I started in 68, but I started for the first 3 months in the University of Pennsylvania Hospital. I missed the first 3 months, but
what was wrong?
I had endocarditis, which was an infection on the heart, and they saved my life there. But in the process, 2 things happened. Webster Todd went into the Republican caucus and demanded that I be made assistant majority leader in my first year, and I wasn't even there. And it happened. And then when I went to the University of Pennsylvania Hospital, about halfway through my stay, the Governor Hughes comes in for the same hospital for an eye operation, cataract. It wasn't. In those days, that was not a simple operation, and he was up on the, of course, on the 7th floor, and I was down on the 1st floor. And every afternoon at 4 o'clock, Betty Hughes would come down with a wheelchair and take me up to the 7th floor, and we would drink martinis till 6. And that's how Dick Hughes and I became very fast friends.
That's good. Webster Todd is the father of Christy Todd Whitman. Yeah. And what enabled him to walk into the Senate in 67?
He was a good friend.
But I mean, what enabled him to convince the senators?
He was state chairman then.
Oh, he was state Republican chairman. Yeah. Okay.
Now you're getting a little of the history.
Yeah, that's good. That's what we want. Who was the first governor you met?
Al Driscoll.
What can you tell us about Driscoll and the meeting?
I love Driscoll.
Yeah.
I used to go sit with Driscoll when he was head of the Turnpike, and he'd come up from, I don't know, Haddonfield. Is that where he lived? Haddonfield, and spend half a day at the Turnpike almost every day. And I'd go down and he'd tell me political stories, and I was kind of a son to him, I think. And some of his staff were good friends of mine. Romer McPhee, who was a lawyer for him. Johnny McPhee's brother. You know John McPhee?
The writer.
His brother Romer was one of Al Driscoll's guys. And I always thought Al Driscoll was a great governor. And his most famous moment was at the annual legislative
Correspondence
dinner in Newark, when some drunk from the back of the room came up and shaking his finger at him. We were up on the raised dais. I'm sitting right next to him, and he grabs a pitcher of water and doused the guy right in the front of 1,000 people. It was.
We haven't seen that in my day at the Correspondence Club dinner.
Now, Bowie Schwartz was running it then.
That name I know. How about Miner? Did you meet Miner?
Oh, I had a lot of intercourse with Miner.
What was your impression of him?
Very conservative guy. Tough guy to make decisions. Honest. And where he and I tied in pretty heavily was when they were trying to put a jetport in our area. And
in the Great Swamp.
The Great Swamp. His was the Great Swamp. Dick Hughes's was the Solberg. And we had a huge meeting in the Assembly shortly after I was just barely a freshman. I couldn't say my own name. And I had to take him on. He was running the meeting. And that was our first brush.
How about Hughes? You say you became fast friends with Hughes as a result of this serendipitous...
Yeah, we became very close. We did a lot together. We did a lot of substance things together.
Such as?
Well, the one I remember the best was when Seton Hall came to the governor and said, "You got to buy our medical school because we're losing our shirts in it." And of course, this was tough for him. He was Roman Catholic, and in 1954, the Catholics had gone out because of their med school and beat a state bond issue for a med school, for a state med school. So there was a lot of tension around the subject. So Dick Hughes asked me to try to get everybody together to see if it could be done, and I didn't think it could be done, but I said, sure, I'll do it. And about that time, Mason Gross from Rutgers came to me and said, I got a plan. And his plan was, if you buy the Seton Hall Med School, which is now our big mess in Newark, if you buy that and you start at the same time a medical school program at Rutgers, it'll balance out. And so this was on a Wednesday. I'll never forget it because I got a meeting shortly thereafter. Wednesday night, he and I went to Morven and talked to Dick Hughes, and he says, it's a deal. And it was a deal. We started a medical school program at Rutgers and bought Seton Hall Medical School, and therein lies one of the great mistakes I ever made in the legislature. Not the buying of it. There was a contest. Will the medical school be moved to Newark or to Morristown? And the suburban legislators were all for Morristown, and of course the big city people were for Newark. And there was a hell of a fight, and some of us, including me, caved in and said, "Oh, go ahead, have it in Newark."
You think today's problems at UMDNJ spring from
I
that?
would say that if UMDNJ or whatever would have been had gone to Morristown and affiliated with those hospitals out there, it would be a roaring major success today.
Of the governors that you knew in those days, who was the best campaigner?
Oh, Dick Hughes by 100 miles.
Yeah? What was so good?
Oh, he was great. He'd campaign anywhere, anytime, street corners. he and I always kidded ourselves because he thought he was the only person that ever campaigned in Shell Pile, New Jersey. Do you know where that is?
It's got to be at the shore somewhere.
Yeah, it's in Salem County on the Delaware River, and it's just a pile of shells. But it's Shell Pile, New Jersey. And so I went down there just to tell him I'd campaign there too. He was a great campaigner. Minor was not a particularly good campaigner. Bill Cahill was not a particularly good campaigner. Brendan became a good campaigner in his second campaign. He wasn't particularly, didn't have to. First campaign, he had a boat ride. That was the first campaign in the United States after Watergate, first one. And
plus, he was running against.
We paid the price.
And he was running against someone who had stood up for Nixon.
Yeah, and Charlie Sandman stood up for him, and so it was perfect for him.
You said that you met Eisenhower. Did you meet Nixon?
Oh, sure, lots of times.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What were your impressions of Nixon?
He's number one of my favorites. Nationally, I was always on the wrong side. I was a Rockefeller delegate. So, Nixon wasn't my particular cup of tea. I mean, not because of Watergate, but long before then.
What other big-time Republicans, either nationally or statewide from the 50s and 60s, spring to mind? Any?
Oh, yeah, a lot of them. Spring to mind. Let's see. Most of the Nixon cabinet folks would come in and out. And New Jersey was fertile ground for Republicans in those days, and they used to they shy away a little today, but they used to come through.
What was the political complexion of the state?
Well, it changed, but the Senate had always been Republican. The House was Democratic for 4 or 5 years, and then became Republican in the 60s, and then it went back Democrat, and then came back. So it shifted. But we had, had Bob Miner, who was an accident to become governor. That should have been a Republican governor. And then you had Dick Hughes, who beat the guy that the labor leader.
George Mitchell.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Jim Mitchell.
Jim Mitchell.
Big Jim Mitchell. And then you had Bill Cahill, Brandon Byrne, and Tom Kean. So it went back and forth at the gubernatorial level, but the legislature was Republican until '53, and then in the Nixon massacre in '52, and then our massacre in '53, we lost control of the legislature. And then Tom Kean got it back.
You mean 72 and 73?
Yeah, 72 and 73.
Yeah. That was a turbulent time in America, the late 60s, early 70s, with Vietnam and Watergate.
Most of our attention in the legislature were to urban kinds of things. That's my first involvement was after we passed the sales tax. We had no school aid formula, almost like today. You can go back, and everything that's happening now happened then. So I was chairman of a commission that developed our first urban school aid formula, and it was a real urban school aid formula in every sense of the word. And it was so urban that I couldn't get the suburbanites to vote for some of it.
What year do you think we're talking about?
70. The school aid formula was either 70, 71, something like that. But there were all kinds of urban programs that were funneling through the Republican legislature. Big-time programs.
Did you have a tax hike as part of your urban education program?
Yeah, sales tax.
Sales tax.
New sales tax.
A new sales tax.
Yeah, I have a distinction on that.
What is it?
I'm the only minority person that ever co-sponsored a broad-based tax. The sales tax was sponsored by the Speaker, the Majority Leader, and me.
Who were the Speaker and Majority Leader, do you recall?
John Davis, I think, was the Speaker from Salem, and The majority leader was from Cumberland. Oh, I forget his name. And me. Three of us.
So you're the only member of a minority party.
That sponsored a broad-based tax.
That's an interesting distinction.
Yeah.
You say that you in the legislature
And
were
you know
largely...
what? I never caught any hell for it.
No?
Never. Politically or otherwise.
Didn't catch up to you when you ran for governor some years later?
No. I don't think it was a factor.
Had the riots, like the Newark riots, had they been
67.
influential? Had they been influential in
Oh, yeah.
focusing the attention of the legislature on urban questions?
We, and this is another Mason Gross initiative, we established Livingston College, which was really designed at that moment to handle urban students.
Huh.
That's where it started. It's broadened since then, but that's where it started. We had all kind of urban aid programs that you could imagine. Yeah.
Did they work?
Some of them.
How about the war in Vietnam? Did that filter its way into New Jersey state
Not
politics?
a hell of a lot, no. You know, we were all aware of it, but it didn't manifest itself in legislation or anything like that.
I think there was one controversy around a Rutgers professor.
Oh yeah, that's Wayne Dumont made a Rutgers communist professor the major issue of his campaign against Dick Hughes' second election, and Dick Hughes just wiped him out on it.
Was his,
Genovese.
Eugene Genovese.
Eugene
yes.
Genovese.
And why did Hughes wipe out Dumont?
I think he made a significant stand that related to the independence of a university to hire and fire, even if extending to a communist. I mean, he made a good case, and Wayne Dumont never sustained his case. I mean, he didn't run a particularly good campaign either. Geez, you get me back to things I hadn't thought about for 50 years.
Good. So you start out in the Senate as an assistant majority leader, thanks to Webster Todd. And within 2 years, you're Senate president?
You know, the sequence is you're assistant majority leader 1 year, you're majority leader the next year, you're the president of the Senate the 3rd year, and you're the president pro tem the 4th year, and you're out the 5th year.
Oh, that's the way the
way it always
worked.
That's the way the system was, yes.
But you changed that.
Yeah, I did.
You decided to stay on as Senate president, or...
Well, it wasn't just me. Bill Cahill wanted me to stay on. And he had Paul Sherwin, who was his Secretary of State, and very savvy political guy, had 4 or 5 Senate votes in his pocket whenever he needed them. And so it wasn't just me. It was...
Did you like being Senate president?
Yeah.
Why?
Well, I always thought it was a place you could get something done, and that was my legislative career, was getting things done.
Who did you have to work most closely with to get things done? The governor, the assembly speaker, your caucus, who?
The governor, Al Beetleson, my majority leader.
He was from Monmouth County?
He was from Monmouth, great legislator. And my caucus, and to a degree the assembly, but they usually they usually went along with what we did.
Who was the speaker when you were Senate president? Tom Kane.
For two of the 3 years, Tom was speaker.
How did you and he hit it off?
Pretty well. He was tough for Cahill. Cahill and he He was a Boy Scout to Cahill. But Tom and I got along. Always did.
Although later, if my memory serves me correctly, he would run against you
he
for
ran
the
against
nomination in '77,
Oh
right?
yeah, he was a late starter and a very big surprise to me when he got into it.
Huh.
And caused me no end of agita.
How many other primary opponents did you have?
Tom Kane, Joe Woodcock, a couple others.
Okay.
But the all intent and purpose it was a two-man race.
You and Kane?
Yeah.
How is it? Well, back in those days, how did one get into the leadership in a body like the Senate?
Well, I told you how I got into it.
Webster Todd put you.
Webster Todd demanded me in it, and but that was a big turnover time. That was the Senate had been Democratic 2-1, and it went 3-1 Republican that year. So and so there were a lot of new folks, a lot of new faces, and so it made some sense to have people who had been in leadership in the Assembly to be in leadership in the Senate.
Did you ask Webster Todd to do that? Did
No.
you lobby for the spot?
No, I was dying. I mean, I was not in good shape. I passed out 4 times in the campaign, twice while I was on the dais.
Really?
Yeah. But the nature of endocarditis is that it has little emboli that break off and go into your system, and wherever they hit you, they knock you out, or kill you.
Mm.
It was a crazy disease that usually is diagnosed in post-mortem kinds of diagnoses. So I got lucky.
Webster Todd was from Somerset County, your county. That's why he wanted you in there.
Yeah, we were friends.
What was he like?
Oh, nice man.
Yeah?
Yeah, he's a very inarticulate is not the right word, but he was a kind of a shy guy and worked hard at the state chairmanship, raised a lot of money, and had a lot of interest. And his wife was the national committee woman. They were a very political family, and very Eisenhower family.
Schley was her name, right?
Yeah.
Schley,
Yeah.
is that right? Is that
Yeah.
her family name?
Good for you, yeah.
Eleanor?
Eleanor Schley Todd.
Right.
She was a dynamo.
Yeah? Is that where Christy Whitman
Got
her?
Yeah, she was even more so than Christy.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh. I'm reminded that Tom Kane got to be Speaker in the Assembly by making a deal with the Democrats, the Hudson County Democrats.
With Mr. Friedland.
With David Friedland, who would become famous 10, 15 years later as a fugitive from justice, a guy who faked his own death and got captured years later in the Maldive Islands.
He was a colorful guy.
Was he?
Oh,
Must have been.
yeah.
Go ahead.
He scared me the worst. We were in a legislative leaders convention in San Diego, and Tom was Speaker and I was the President of the Senate, and Friedland, I don't know what he was, but he was there. And the first night we went out to dinner and he ordered $600 bottles of wine. That made me worry.
Who do you think was picking that up, the taxpayer or Mr. Friedland?
Who the hell knows?
What was your reaction to the deal Kane made to become Speaker?
No, I wasn't particularly happy with it at all. I wish he had made it with somebody else, let's put it that way.
With some other group of Democrats, rather than the Hudson Democrats?
Yeah.
Because of their reputation?
Yeah, their reputation in those days wasn't particularly positive. But, Tom was smart enough to make to find some votes that would make him speaker.
He was ambitious.
Oh, he's always ambitious. Yeah, sure. There's nothing wrong with that.
No, and you don't get to be governor of New Jersey unless
No.
you're ambitious. And ironically, his son ran for the U.S. Senate this year, castigating a Hudson County Democrat as being corrupt. But that's off our subject here.
That's for another day.
Let's move to the gubernatorial election of '73. By '73, you had given up the Senate president's seat?
I gave it up in '72. In '73, I gave it up in '73.
You served one extra year beyond, or no, you served two extra years.
Yeah, I served 3 years, and then I could have served a 4th year, seriously. I had the votes, but it was important that Al Betelson be president of the Senate before he got out, and so I had, and my thing was kind of Eagleton related. This was a major recommendation of Eagleton that we have more permanent leadership, but I never thought more permanent leadership was forever, and it has been interpreted that way since.
You did start a trend. We've seen the Senate presidents for 8 and 10 years.
Yeah, Donnie D was 10 years, I think.
Yeah. Did you consider running for governor in '73?
No, I was running for governor in '69.
Really?
Yeah, and Bill Cahill and I. And
were you officially a candidate for governor?
I was a candidate in the primary.
Uh-huh.
And I got a lot of brochures to prove it. And I was a serious candidate in the primary. And it came down to negotiations with Bergen County, which was the big Republican county. And Cahill got it and I didn't. So I dropped out.
Who was the key Republican from Bergen in those days?
Nelson Gross.
So you dropped out
and Walter Henry Jones, he was still there too.
You dropped out of the primary running?
I dropped out. Bill Ozard stayed in, I think. Harry Sears stayed in. Frank McDermott stayed in. And Cahill took them all to the cleaners.
Ozard stayed in. That means there were 2 Somerset County Republicans running for governor.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so you had gubernatorial ambitions as early as '69.
Well, I knew that was a year too. That was a year for me. I was relatively hot in the legislature. It was a year that we were all convinced the Republicans were going to.
What made you hot? Why were you hot?
Well, I've been involved in just about every major initiative that came down the street.
'73 would have been a natural year to run because, oh no, I guess it wouldn't. You would have had to challenge a sitting governor within your own party, which is what happened.
Well, what happened was there's a story, I don't really want to get into this, but in '72, Bill Cahill came to me in November and said, I'm not going to run again. He said, nobody knows this but my family and Paul Sherwin, and he said, I want you to run. This was November in '72, and he said, you don't have to give me an answer now. Talk to your wife, and we'll talk right after Christmas. And so we talked it over, and we said, what the hell, let's run. And so I waited, and then it became New Year, and then I knew something was wrong, so I went in to see Cahill, and he said, what I told you is true. I don't want to run, but my advisors tell me that I'm the only person that can beat Charlie Sandman in a primary, because Charlie was coming on. And I said, oh, okay, I understand. Then he says, will you be my campaign manager? So I spent the whole spring debating Charlie Sandman, because Cahill never came out. You know, he never showed.
You formally debated Sandman?
Oh, yeah, and all over the state.
So you got a good practice at
I got a little practice, yeah.
Let's go back 4 years. You say that Cahill wiped out Ozard and Jones and whoever else ran in 69.
Harry Sears.
Sears. What made him so strong?
Well, he had a combination of counties. He had a bunch of the Shore, South Jersey, and Bergen County, and parlayed them. I mean, those are, in those days, the county line was pretty significant, and it still is to a degree, but not like it used to be. So he had the preponderance of the county lines. Harry Sears had Morris, but Morris doesn't really have a county line, and Bill Ozard had one or two, and Frank McDermott had Union County, and they kind of split. It's kind of like when we get to Brendan Byrne. It's kind of like Brendan Byrne's re-election campaign, which is fascinating.
You were pretty much part of that.
Well, not the early part. The early part was that 5 guys took him on, and nobody thought he was going to win that primary, including me.
We'll get there.
Yeah, we'll get to that. But Cahill had a boat ride, really. I mean, Bob Miner tried to come back, but he didn't really have the fire in his belly like he had it the first time.
Why didn't Cahill campaign harder against Sandman?
He didn't want to be governor.
Why not?
Well, a lot of his friends were being indicted. The U.S. Attorney was after his good friends. Every week somebody else was getting shot at by the U.S. Attorney. And it really preyed on him, and it preyed on his wife. And got to the point he wouldn't even go out. I mean, he didn't. I don't remember one major campaign stop that he made in that primary.
You say that his advisors said, you're the only one who can stop Sandman. What was important about stopping Sandman?
Well,
why did they dislike Sandman?
Well, because he was running against them. When you're in and somebody's trying to knock you out, that's a very natural thing. And Charlie had been a pretty good legislator, but he was a lot more conservative than Bill Cahill was. And there was a part of that problem. That was part of the problem too.
Sandman was a congressman at the time.
Yeah.
But he had come out of the legislature?
Yeah. He had been president of the Senate.
Uh-huh.
Years back. He was a fun guy to campaign with.
Yeah?
He really was. I enjoyed. We debated and debated, and we had a good time together.
But you implied that Cahill wanted to stop him. What were their personal relations, Cahill and
I don't think they were too good. Uh-huh. I don't really know. That's a good question that I never asked myself.
Cahill had embraced the idea of an income tax during his first term. Did he pay a political price for that?
Yeah, paid a political price for a number of things. The income tax proposal went down quickly in flames, but he had to pass a number of taxes in order to balance things out, and I think that all, and of course we passed them for him. But
was the sales tax?
There was a sales tax increase, yeah.
An increase.
Yeah, I don't know whether it was 1 cent or 2. I think it was 2. Because it started at 3%, so I think he had a 2% sales tax plus some other taxes, and then he had a whole bunch of. He was a good governor. I mean, he was a tough governor. He didn't take anything from anybody. You know, he was tough.
Do you think he made a political mistake by embracing an income tax?
Probably. We just, we weren't ready for the income tax. We just passed a sales tax 4 years before, And, you know, it was...
That was the one you co-sponsored?
Yeah, that's the one I co-sponsored, right?
The first one, the very first one?
Yeah, 3%.
Around this period of time, the Supreme Court issued the Robinson v. Cahill decision. What was your reaction to that decision?
Oh, I thought it was a very bad decision. I thought the Attorney General gave it a bad ride. You know, we had a school aid formula that fully implemented would have met all the tests of the court. And you know, Dick Hughes and I were friends. He was Chief Justice, and I gave him I still have it, a letter which summarized why they shouldn't do what they did. They eventually did, and they could have mandated lots of other things. They could have said the Bateman-Tansman formula fully implemented would meet the test of the court. They didn't even try to do that.
What was the Bateman-Tansman formula?
That was
the existing school formula?
When the 3% sales tax went on, it's funny how history is the same. We had no school aid formula to distribute the money. And so we set up a commission. I was chairman of it with Norm Tansman, a Democrat senator. And
from where?
For 2 years, we met every week, and we developed a formula that was, for the first time, that was pumping aid into the urban areas that needed it. It was, and one of the main components was a relationship to aid for dependent children distribution in a particular community. If you had a big ADC program, you got additional funds for school aid and significant additional funds. And we were able to implement some of it, but we couldn't. The thing that would have met the court test was there was a part of the formula that would have given incentives to school districts that put in special programs, special physics program, special music program, whatever. If you introduced better programs into your school system, you got additional aid. I couldn't get the Republican senators to approve that. And with a little prodding from the court, I think we could have gotten them to approve that. But we made one fatal mistake that I acknowledged to Hughes when I wrote him, and that is we were pumping. I'll give you in the first year of my school aid formula, Newark went from about $28 million in school aid to almost $80 million in school aid. I mean, that was a significant difference. But what happened was, back in those days, the mayors, of course, they still today, controlled what the local community was going to give. So when we increased Newark $60 million, the then mayor of Newark, Kem Gibson, reduced the local contribution by almost $60 million. So it all went to his tax credits.
Huh.
Yeah.
So that was a mistake.
That was a mistake
in the drafting of the legislation.
That was a mistake in the legislation. We should have provided that they couldn't do that. And we didn't think about it. It was one of those mistakes. But if we had enacted incentives for better school programs, we would have met the test, I think. I'm not a lawyer, but... Did
you resent the court intervening in this matter, or they had no choice?
I don't think they had a choice. I didn't resent them intervening as much as that they didn't know what they were doing.
You're known for your support for education, is that
And
Fair to say.
NJEA came out against me when I ran against Brendan.
How did you get interested in school issues, or why?
I was just, I started early on. I was the original sponsor with Beatleson of the County College Act, and I just a natural thing in the early '60s, and it was an interest of mine.
Why did the NJEA come out against you?
Because I didn't support the income tax in
76? Or
77, 76, 76, 77. After I passed almost all the legislation for about 15 years.
In retrospect, did the Supreme Court focus too much on equalizing spending?
In retrospect, they didn't understand what they were doing, and that's normal. I mean, you know, they're not educators. They're not involved in school aid formulas, and the then Attorney General was not interested in defending the Bateman school aid formula, so it got a bad ride. And it wasn't just the courts doing. It was also doing of the Byrne administration, which didn't you know, for whatever reason, they weren't going to defend my school aid formula.
You say it had a Democratic co-sponsor. You said they didn't want to support a Republican's plan?
Well, whatever. Maybe, you know, administrations have a desire to do their own thing, and you know, I understand that. And so they thought they could put one together, and they had the same problem that we had in the '60s. They had a new tax and no way to distribute it.
Would it have been better in hindsight to force a statewide property tax rather than an income tax?
Might have been at that time, yeah.
Why?
I think that because property taxes weren't high then, and I think you could have probably made a case for something like that. But it's different today.
Would it have been better to force county-wide school districts back then, or
well, you know,
county-based spending formulas?
You got to understand that back then, local control was even more powerful than it is today. I had an experience that one of my commissions, we had a lot of commissions in those days, one of my commissions was to protect and preserve the Delaware and Raritan Canal. And that was a lot tougher than it sounds, but we decided to make it a state park, to protect it forever. And in the legislation, there's a big bill, you know, there's bills. In the legislation, we literally gave zoning powers to the Delaware and Raritan Canal Commission over developments that might impinge on the canal. And thank God the guys didn't read the bill, because if they had read the bill, I'd have never got it passed.
Interesting.
Oh, there's that was another interesting one. That Johnny Lynch was my co-sponsor in all that, because the Delaware and Raritan Canal ended up in New Brunswick, so John had an interest. And after almost a year, I got the bill on the board in the Senate. And half an hour before the session, Johnny comes up to me and he says, I got to pull all our support and I have to vote against the bill. He'd been working on it for 2 years with me. I said, what the hell's going on? You know, he said, well, I just realized that Delaware and Raritan Canal runs underneath the area that I want to build the new bridge, Route 18 bridge across the Raritan River. And he said, if that's a state park, I'll never get the the permits to do what we have to do on the Route 18 bridge. So you know what we did?
What?
We ended the canal at the Somerset County border, half a mile from where it flowed underneath the. So we ended the state park. I mean, at the border, and so Johnny supported it.
You made that accommodation right then and there?
In a half an hour. And the Route 18 bridge was built, and I named it the John Lynch Bridge. Or the legislature named it the
That's
John
a good
Lynch
story.
Bridge.
After Sandman won the nomination in '73, did you feel that he had a chance at all against
No.
Byrne? Why?
No. I don't think anybody would have had a chance. You know, you got to understand the atmosphere. This was the first election in the United States after Nixon's impeachment or whatever it was.
Resignation.
And
impeachment.
And-
It was an
and,
unsuccessful impeachment, I guess.
there was you could feel it. No Republican was going to win that election. I wouldn't have won that election.
Was Byrne a good candidate?
Oh yeah, Brennan was a good candidate then. He was the man who couldn't be bought. You know, there's some mafia guy said that on tape, and so you know, he was perfect for that moment. You know, when we were talking about people who were doing wrong things. So yeah, it was ideal. And of course, that election wiped out a lot of good senators, and a lot of good legislators.
Like who?
Oh, like Dick Stout from Monmouth County, a couple of them from Camden County. We had 4 senators, Republican senators from Camden County. About five got wiped out. And he said, you know, it was a landslide.
Given that Byrne had everything going for him in that race and had such a substantial lead over Sandman, a boat ride, as you would call it, should he have come out for a broad-based tax then during the campaign rather than, say...
Probably not. Probably. It would have been premature for him to do that.
Would he have still won the election if he had? Or could it have cost him
I
the election?
suspected he would have won the election no matter what he said.
Because of the climate?
The 73 election,
Yeah. Did you campaign for Sandman?
More or less. You know, Charlie was a good friend of mine, and you know, I could not campaign. I could not campaign, but I didn't have my heart and soul in it.
Because you knew the outcome, or because of him?
And because of the atmosphere, it was poison for Republicans, and that was the worst year I can ever remember.
Byrne's elected, and you are a senator.
I'm now in the minority.
You're now in the minority because he carried a majority in with him. What do you do during these first few years of the first Byrne term?
Well, it's kind of a cultural shock when you've been running the Senate for several years, and then you're in the minority. So I didn't do, you know, it wasn't my most productive of my most productive years. But I had a lot of things going that I had going before he got elected. And what you do is, in those days, and so different today, I had some pretty significant programs. One of them was a prescription drug program for senior citizens. It was the first one, and it hadn't passed. So I just gave it to Joe Merlino because he was the logical Democrat to handle it. And what you do is, if you have some substantive issues in those days, you gave them to the other guys.
You think it's different today?
Yeah,
What do you do today if you have a sub? You don't get it passed, right? Or what?
Or they steal it. No, they don't have that kind of camaraderie between the two parties.
Well, when you give it to Joe Merlino, that's almost like him stealing it, unless he gives you some credit for it.
Well, I was a co-sponsor.
You were, okay.
And he gave me credit for it. When he passed it, he at the moment he said where it came from. So it worked out.
Some people have said that the legislature in '74 found the Byrne administration, the people around Byrne, like Dick Leone and Lou Caden, to be arrogant, young, brash, arrogant.
Yeah, that is absolutely what it was.
Did you find them that way?
Yeah.
What were they like?
Well, they knew more than we did about everything. But that's not unusual either. There's a lot of focus on Leone and Caden, but usually the first guy that a governor puts in that job doesn't make it. Lou Thurston didn't make it, and Lou Thurston was a real policy wonk, but it's a very difficult assignment to come in with a new governor and be the chief of staff or the head counsel. I mean, it really is tough for the first time. And whenever anybody gets appointed, I always wonder how long they're going to last.
Yeah, we've seen all the recent first chiefs of staff go after a year.
So part of that was part of that syndrome was the fact that they were the first ones. Because they were bright guys.
Did you like them?
Yeah, I liked Leone better than Caden. Caden was a tough guy to like.
Yeah. In that first year, they came up with a plan to institute an income tax and reform school funding, and it didn't pass. Why not?
Because the school funding program was incomplete as far as a lot of people were concerned. I mean, passing an income tax was never easy. Dick Hughes tried it and failed before he had a sales tax. Bill Cahill tried it and failed. So you're talking about, this is the third try for an income tax. So you knew it had a lot of trouble in enactment. And frankly, I wasn't in any great rush to help them.
Were you already thinking you'd be running against them in '77?
Well, I was thinking about running, but it wasn't so much that. Was that I had taken my bath in broad-based taxes. I sponsored one, and I wasn't anxious to be a lead player in the next one.
But you told us that it didn't cost you that much to have sponsored.
No, but I suspect it would have if I had done the second one. I always thought it would have. I didn't know whether it would or not.
What was the reaction to the income tax partisan? Were the Democrats for it because the governor was pushing it and the Republicans against it? Was it a partisan?
It was essentially a pretty partisan issue. But there were some Democrats that his problem was he couldn't get enough Democrats to pass the program at first.
Took him 2 years. What eventually?
Well, I think the pressures. The powers of the governor are pretty. The arms of the governor are pretty long, and if you're a governor who knows his powers or her powers, you can persuade a lot of people over a period of time.
Did Governor Byrne know his powers?
Yeah, I think
quickly.
He did. Well, not quite. Yeah, he knew the system pretty well. He'd been around the Hughes administration. He He wasn't naive.
How does a governor's powers work in that context? What can a governor do to put pressure on a legislator to shift a position?
Try to find out what you, Michael, as a legislator, really was interested in.
And make a deal.
And make a deal. It's part of what goes on.
Makes the system work, doesn't it? I mean, it's not
oh, sure.
You say the word deal and you think,
yeah,
you shudder a little bit, but that's really what it's about, isn't it?
Sure, absolutely. Compromise is totally essential to the governmental world.
By the time they passed the income tax, I guess the court shut the schools down that summer, and that also helped them get it passed, right?
Yeah.
But you voted against it.
I did.
By that time, had you formed in your mind that you were going to run against this
tax
hiking governor?
Yeah, about that time, yeah. No, it wasn't. It wasn't so much tax hiking governor when I was. This was really the last time that I could run. I was going to leave the Senate. I mean, I'd been there 10 years or 9 years, and so if I wanted to be governor, it had to be that time. I wasn't a guy that was going to hang around and I would do something else. So that it became quite obvious to me if I wanted to be governor, and I wanted to be governor. I knew more about policy than anybody in the legislature practically, and it just made sense. But it wasn't Brendan Byrne so much, it wasn't the issue so much, that was really the time. And as I told you, the real time for me to run was 69. I was hot, and it didn't go together.
Did you get pressured by the Byrne administration to vote for the income tax?
By him, yeah.
By him?
Oh, sure. He talked to me several times about it.
Alone in his office?
Yeah.
He'd call you in?
Yeah.
There wasn't something you wanted?
Yeah. Not that he could give me.
You wanted to be governor.
Yeah, that's right. But really, a lot of people say that's the reason I did what I did. That's not the reason I did what I did at all. I wasn't convinced he had a good spending program, but you can't, that everybody would say that's bullshit. And I wasn't about to be a candidate who had made the difference in two major broad-based taxes, not one.
So we're now in the summer of '76 with a November of '77 election looming. All right. When did you start running?
Summer of '76. I had a big party at the convention, the Republican convention.
Where was the convention that year?
It was in Kansas City, I think, wasn't it?
I don't know.
I think it was. Yeah.
Who else was interested in the Republican gubernatorial nomination?
Oh, a whole bunch of people. Joey Woodcock from Bergen County, who was a good state senator. He was a really good guy. Frank McDermott for a while, but he got out of it. And there were a couple of others. It wasn't like the Democrat primary.
Well, you must have sensed a weak incumbent.
I didn't think Brendan was going to be the candidate.
Oh, you didn't?
No, I was. That's the reason it didn't. I was almost convinced he couldn't win a primary. And what did he get? 28% of the vote.
Who did you think would win the Democratic primary?
Guy from Hudson County. Who was it? But they never got together. There were 5 of them running against him, and they.
Joe LaFonte? No.
No.
Paul Jordan dropped out.
Paul Jordan, I think it was. Yeah.
He dropped out when he lost.
Yeah, he dropped out. Yeah. And then Ralph Rose was in it. A whole bunch of guys that were in it, and none of them got together. If any 2 of them had gotten together, they'd have won. which kind of surprised me because it was almost a setup for him. He didn't have 30% of the votes, and he was the nominee, and he was the one that I was more worried about from the start.
Because he was the incumbent?
Incumbent, yes, and because of the tax situation, because of the homestead rebate program, which is the state's first homestead rebate program, and that turned out to be the Achilles heel of the election.
Did the first checks go out in 77 or in 76?
77.
77. So the first checks went out with Brendan Byrne's name on them?
Yeah, but it wasn't just that. It wasn't the checks. It was that all the commuters, and from North Jersey and from my area and from the Camden area and the Haddonfield area, they were all paying income taxes to the New York and Pennsylvania. So under this first income tax, they not only didn't have to pay New York, they paid New Jersey, which was good. They also got $500 in addition. So what happened was, and if you look at the election results, you'll see it. Towns like Ridgewood, Burnersville, my Burnersville, I used to win 5-1. I just barely carried because these were rich homeowners or wealthy homeowners who were commuters who had no new tax because they were paying the same tax. They were paying a higher tax in New York actually. And who got $500 to boot. They weren't about to trade that in for me.
Very interesting.
Yeah, no, that was the election.
So did you think Brendan Byrne was going to run?
I thought he would end up not running. All along, up till the last month, up till about a month before the election, I was convinced he was not going to make it through.
A month before the primary election?
Maybe a couple months, yeah.
Like April?
Yeah.
Why? Was the income tax so unpopular?
Well, he was unpopular at the moment. And Democrats were jumping on him from every direction. 5 of them. And
some from his own cabinet. Some from his own cabinet? Yes?
Joe Hoffman.
Yeah, Joe, that's right. Joe was in that. It just didn't look good for him. And I kept hearing rumors from the inside that he was pretty well decided not to run. Or maybe this was back in March, something like that.
Uh-huh.
And the longer it went on, the more I became convinced that if they all stayed in, he'd win. But then about that time, I was having real problems with Tommy Kane, so I wasn't really looking as much as I.
What kind of problems?
Well, Tommy took me on a bunch of issues that he thought were popular. Capital punishment, he was for it, I was against it. I was a right-to-lifer. There were a whole bunch of, about half a dozen issues that he focused on, which were pretty good fight issues, really.
Was one of you more moderate and the other more conservative, or?
I think I was much more moderate than Tom. He moderated very well later on, but then he wasn't particularly moderate, and he forced me into what he did for me more than anything else, or did to me, was that on the tax position. He took a very tough anti-tax position in the primary and forced me kind of to do the same thing, or I probably wouldn't have sustained myself in the primary.
Did you debate him?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
And several others as well?
Yeah.
Other candidates? Yeah. Who was better known, you or Kane?
I was. But that's all relative. You think you're better known, nobody knows who the hell you are. That's one of the great revelations you have when you're president of the Senate or Speaker of the House. Nobody knows who you are. But it's a little different today
I was
because
about to say, you think that's true today?
well, no, because he's been president of the Senate, has been governor, and he's pretty well known and pretty well liked.
Who were the key people in your campaign?
Oh gosh. Well, my head finance guy was Dick Sellers, who was president of Johnson & Johnson. Chris Daggett worked very hard in the campaign. Bill Taggart worked very hard in the campaign. A whole bunch of pretty good people worked in the campaign. Lou Thurston.
How did the Republican primary end up? I mean, we know you won, but was it close?
No.
What did you get? What did Kane get?
I think I beat him 2-1, something like that. 200 and some thousand to 100,000, something like that. He got whipped pretty good. But right in the middle of the primary, right in the middle of April, early May, I thought it was close. I really did. I thought he was, because we're playing the Republican audiences, and he had some issues that resonated better with Republicans than my issues.
Like capital punishment?
Like capital punishment.
Okay, so you win the primary, and Brendan Byrne miraculously wins his primary. You said a few minutes ago that you feared him more than any of these others.
Yeah.
Why?
Because he was governor, and the power of the incumbency is something I knew a little bit about. And two, I never thought I could handle him on the tax issue.
Really?
Yeah, never thought.
Well, that flies in the face of conventional logic, which says that you should have had the inside track because he hiked the tax.
Except the homestead rebates played a much larger role in that election than any other election, because this was the first one, the first rebate.
When did it go out? What month?
Well, the first check went out, I think they went out in July, something like that, July or August, right in that period. But I kept hearing rumors that something was happening in the Treasury, and that I should go down and demand to know what they were doing at night. This was about 2 weeks before the election.
What was that all about?
Well, Brendan and I campaigned together on Election Day, which was pouring rain. We went to 2 or 3 different places. He'd be there or I'd be there. I went home about 2 o'clock in the afternoon because it was just absolutely a downpour for 48 hours. I sat down, and right at the top of my pile of stuff in the kitchen, I sat down, and my wife gave me my martini, and we were saying, "Thank God we're here,"
Meaning it's over? Thank God it's over?
Right at the top of the pile was a letter, a Dear Homeowner letter from Brendan, saying that we're happy that you got your homestead rebate, and your next rebate will be in March of next year. The Treasury Department has sent one of those to everybody in the state of New Jersey.
Really?
Every homeowner. Yeah.
How interesting.
Yeah. No, it was. That was the. No matter when all the bullshit is done, that was the election, the homestead rebate, and I don't even know who brought that on. Somebody told me it was the guy who ran the assembly from Trenton.
Jeff Ranty?
No. Before Jeff. I'll think of his name. But in any case, it was a stroke of genius, because all the Republicans who commuted to New York City were getting a free $500, and they didn't get any tax because they were already paying the income tax.
How did you handle the tax issue after the primary? You say that Kane forced you to be against a tax.
No, he didn't force me to be against. His tough opposition made I had to kind of parrot what he said. You know, I wasn't forced to do it, but I was worried about losing the primary, frankly.
Right. Okay, so in the primary, you're a hard anti-income tax guy.
Yeah.
And then it was Dick Coffey's idea?
I heard it was Dick Coffey's
rebate?
idea.
Okay.
I don't know whose idea it was, but it was brilliant. It was brilliant at that moment. And neither Brendan nor I, because we talked about it, realized how important it was.
All right, so you're up against Brendan. He's hiked the income tax.
Up against Brendan, and we start right out a week after the primary in our first debate. We had 13 debates.
Wow.
And we had a big debate at Princeton. And I never told him this, but they had a house. The Princeton gym was filled, 1,500 people, something like that. And my father was dying in Somerset Medical Center at the time, and I should have never gone to the debate, because by the time I got home, he was dead. And it was the worst moment of my life, I think, my political life. I didn't want to go. My heart wasn't in it. And
you felt you couldn't have canceled?
That's what my advisors told me, you can't cancel.
Was it a mistake to have so many debates?
No, I think it was good. I wasn't. That didn't bother me. He won. If we had 13, he probably won 8, and I probably won 5, something like that.
About halfway into the election season, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, you called a press conference and announced your economic plan, the Bateman-Simon plan. How important was Bill Simon in your campaign?
He and Chris Daggett did that particular piece. They worked on the tax issue, and
Simon had been U.S. Treasury Secretary.
He had been Secretary of the Treasury, and at that time he was a high level kind of a well known and kind of respected. He was a tough Treasury Secretary, and it's a lot of Brendan typically made it the BS plan, and which was wonderful, really, when you think about it. But that didn't have any effect.
No?
No.
Because when his people tell the story,
yeah,
they think that had a big effect.
No, I think the big effect was the homestead rebate.
They don't talk about that.
Yeah. Well, if you look at the election results, if you go back and read those election results, I had more votes in the cities than any Republican had ever had before. But I got wiped out in Ridgewood, Bernardsville, Morristown,
Commuter towns.
Huh?
Commuter towns.
Commuter towns. Wiped out.
How phony was your plan?
It wasn't phony, but it wasn't phony at all, except it depended upon doing away with the homestead rebates. That's the only way I could make it work.
Because the way the Democratic people from that time portray it is, well, the numbers just didn't add up in that time.
Yeah, well, they didn't add up only because I endorsed an increase in the sales tax. That was part of the plan, a 1 cent increase in the sales tax, and the other unwritten part of the plan was to do away with the homestead rebates.
That was unwritten?
Well, we didn't brag about it, but it was part of the plan.
Okay.
Well, let's say we downplayed it.
Do you recall whether the media coverage of the tax issue worked to Byrne's advantage?
Well, I think at that time in September, the general opinion was that he was behind and I was ahead. I never really took that very seriously because nobody knew me, even then. But his ability to focus a BS plan attracted the press. I think they liked that. That was. And they can't blame him for that. If I'd been writing, I'd have found that quite fun to write about.
Often the press subtly favors a governor or a president or whatever who makes the tough decision, who's willing to hike the tax. Did you sense that in the New Jersey media?
Yeah, but I had very good close relationships with the guys who wrote. I mean, I grew up in press. I knew them all. I always got treated fairly. To a degree, I got treated unfairly on that issue, but you know, it was something I deserved. You know, I always had a great, I had great rapport with the press, good respect. I had two reporters that would constantly write stories about things I said that I never said, but I had confidence that they say it right. You know, so I wasn't. I have nothing but good feelings about the press in those days.
When you say you had two reporters who would make up a quote for you,
yeah,
they just understood where you were coming from?
Absolutely. John Davies being one of them, Bowie Schwartz being another. You know, they just wrote. They knew what I would. They knew how I thought about issues, and they'd quote me. And it didn't bother me because
they got it right.
They usually got it right. Yeah.
What were your own polls showing during the campaign?
About what the public polls were showing, that I was somewhat less ahead in September than the public polls were, and that I slid from there, and then I started recovering. Then I got sick for a week right in the gut of the campaign.
When in October?
The last week in October.
Last week in October.
I had a fever of 103 for the whole week. That really took me out. I mean, I campaigned, but I really didn't campaign.
That's bad luck.
Yeah, it happens. Shit happens, you know. But when I read Brendan's letter on the afternoon before the election, I sat and wrote my speech.
You knew that.
Yeah, I knew. That's why it was such a good speech. It was written ahead of time. It's one of the better speeches I've made in the whole campaign. My concession speech.
Did you buy television commercial time in those days?
Oh yeah. Used TV. I got less than I had hoped for from my television advisors. They didn't do a good job, and probably it was because of me, but they didn't do a good job.
You didn't like the commercials as much.
I didn't particularly like the commercials, and you know, my problem was I had run a bunch of campaigns, and I did too much trying to run my own campaign instead of being the campaigner.
They say that the candidate should never run his own campaign.
Yeah.
Is that true?
I think that's true. Yeah, I know that's true.
You tried to micromanage your own.
Yeah,
campaign?
and I'd run several campaigns, so I knew a little bit about it.
Is there anything in hindsight that you would have done differently?
Yeah.
What?
I'd have ridden. I should. You know, I tend to say what I think. I always did, and that was part of my successes with legislators, I think. But I could have ridden out the campaign. I could have said, I have to see what the composition of the legislature that gets elected in this election, and to see what I might be able to do with the next legislature without taking a specific position. I felt obligated to take a specific position because in June I said I was gonna.
On taxes.
Yeah.
You could have danced around it?
I could have ducked through it, yeah. I think I could have. Well, Brendan would have been hounding me, but I think I could have made it through. But having said that, I don't think I could have survived the homestead rebates. I really don't. And see, they've never been that significant since, because that was the only time in history when people had been paying to another state and then they turned and paid to New Jersey. So, you know, there was no impact of the income tax on 200,000 or 300,000 people.
What did you say in your concession speech that you got so much extra time to write?
Just said I lost, you know, I tried and I lost, and I think Brendan will be a good governor the second term, and turns out that he was a better governor, and some of that was from that election. I mean, you know, I think.
How so? Explain.
I think he was more thoughtful on issues in his second term. I think he was much more productive as a governor in his second term. Obviously, you get confidence in a re-election. To that extent, I gave him a lot of confidence. You know, he was one-term burn when I was running, and I made him two-term burn.
What was the margin of victory? Do you recall?
A couple 100,000, I think, 250, something like that. It wasn't close.
Did you enjoy running for governor?
Oh, I loved it. I had a better campaign than he did. I mean, I had people all around me. You know, we had a ball. We had all kinds of volunteers. But you know, there's a real challenge running against an incumbent. Let me tell you, I do things like, and you know, everybody goes in the summertime to the Sussex Horse Show, and I went up there on a Thursday, got there 7 o'clock in the morning, had a breakfast meeting with a lot of people, shook hands all day long, left there about 7 o'clock at night, totally wiped out, but you know, very satisfied. The next morning, Brendan gets in a state helicopter, flies up to the Sussex Horse Show, and signs a bill making the horse the New Jersey state animal. Now, who won that battle? I mean, you know, this campaigning is hard against an incumbent administration that knows what they're doing.
Did you and Brendan Byrne manage to stay cordial and friendly during that campaign?
Yeah. Yes, we did. We had several, we had some fiery moments in debates and stuff like that. But I never tried to take him down in any way but properly, and vice versa.
Did you like one another?
Yeah.
You think you did, both of you?
I like Brendan.
I know you like him today. Did you like him?
Yeah, I liked him then. Yeah.
Have you seen much of one another over the years?
Yeah. Yeah, he came, when I taught my Rutgers class, he came every year. He was governor. And, you know, he offered me a cabinet job after the election.
Did he really?
Nobody knows that.
Huh. Which one?
Education.
Why did you turn it down?
Didn't really have. It was not my cup of tea. I wanted to be governor, and when I didn't win, I figured I'd logically do something else.
Did Brendan do anything in the '77 campaign that you thought was unfair? or resented?
No, of course I resented the homestead rebate, but that's not unfair. That was a tactic and a good one. No, campaign-wise, no. The people around him did things, and the people around me did things probably that one or the other would judge as pushing the envelope. But
anything come to mind?
well, we had a Bateman train. Some guy in South River or something had a truck that looked like a train and made of horns, whistles, and bells, and you could put a lot of people in it. And my kids used to take that train to follow Brendan's schedule around, and it used to tee off the people around Brendan. I don't think it really got to him much.
Your kids, one of whom is in the legislature now.
Hmm?
Your kids, one of whom is in the legislature today.
Who's about to announce for the Senate
Is he?
in the next few days.
For Walter Kavanaugh's seat? The governor dominates the political scene in New Jersey.
Absolutely.
Is that good or bad?
That's good.
Why?
Oh, I think one person, I think, we only elect one person. A lot of states elect different kinds of folks, attorney generals, lieutenant governors, comptrollers, and you get a lot of elected officials. I think having the responsibility basically on one person puts, it's good for focus. It's good for if you're a good governor. You can get a lot of things done because of it. It puts a premium, of course, on the kind of people that you bring into your administration. But basically, I like the idea of one statewide elected official.
We're going to get a lieutenant governor.
Yeah, but they're elected together, so it won't be as much as it's not an independent election. I don't think.
There was a proposal for an elected state controller. It's now become an appointed state controller in Trenton currently. What do you think about an elected state controller or an appointed?
No.
No?
No, I'm not. So the administration should have all the responsibility of running the executive branch of government, and elected cross checks never have been very attractive to me.